I'm Nate from Legion PC Mods, and today we'll be looking at budget builds. With the price of DDR4 RAM through the roof, as well as GPUs still being up in the air with cryptocurrency mining, this could be the best way to get the majority of users into 1080p gaming today. Starting off with our used parts will be our case, the Bit Phoenix Shinobi. It's got the little side window in there, so elite. We've got fans in the top, fans in the front. There's no water cooling support, unfortunately, but that won't worry us because that will really start to rack up the dollars and we're going budget build. For our motherboard and CPU, we've got the Asus Z68V Pro Gen 3. And in here, there is an i5 3570K, 4-core, 4-thread, 6MB of L3 cache, and a 75W TDP, so it runs nice and cool. It has a 3.4 GHz base with a 3.8 GHz 1-core turbo, but I'm pretty sure we can overclock that a little higher than that since we're using a Z68 motherboard. Now this motherboard isn't bad for the money. It was about a mid-range motherboard back in the day, and around about 2012-ish, maybe a little bit earlier. It has two 6GB SATA ports for that fast transfer, the rest are just the 3 gig. We can fit up to 2200 MHz RAM in this, and it can do quad SLI and quad crossfire. Nailed it. I don't know if I can edit that out.
I don't think you should.
With this motherboard, I really like the BIOS. It's quite easy to use. It has all the features you need for mid-level to slightly high-level overclocking, and the VRM heatsinks, these are my favourite part. The way they're designed, I don't know if you can see, but the hatchings go both ways. So it doesn't matter which way the airflow hits the VRMs, it gets right in between and cools them very well. I had some really good times overclocking on this board. It actually overclocks on average about 0.1 GHz or 100 MHz higher than my Gigabyte Z77 board. So a nice little board for the money. You could probably pick one up for around about $100 second hand. Very much recommended. For cooling the 3570K, we're going to use the Thermaltake Contact 21. It's not a bad little cooler. It's better than the Intel cooler, but it's worse than a Hyper 212. But you can probably pick one of these up for next to nothing. Most people are just about throwing them out because it's so cheap and easy to get something slightly bigger. It's a 92mm fan. It does about 2200 RPM, I've noticed in Hardware Monitor. It says the spec's 2400, but I think due to age, it can't ramp up that high. And also, one thing to remember with the Contact 21, it is notoriously hard to install compared to other air coolers. You really want to install this on the motherboard before installing the motherboard into the case, because once you've got the motherboard in the case, it's very difficult to get this little back plate and these little compression screws to line up with this while you're trying to keep the thermal paste all intact. For RAM, we'll be using the Kingston HyperX. It's DDR3, 1600 MHz rated. It comes in at 1333 at 1.5 volts out of the box, but it can be XMP'd up to 1600 MHz at 1.65 volts. That's where these massive heat spreaders come in handy, because 1.65 volts is fairly hefty for RAM voltage. For GPU, we have a GTX 970, it's a Gainwood, and a blower style cooler, which will be handy for exhausting the heat outside of the case. Now these came with 4 GB of VRAM, although 3.5 GB of VRAM are connected via the full speed bus, and 500 MB is connected by a slower bus. That's due to the way that NVIDIA fused off cores, because this is the same core as a 980 with cores fused off. For power supply, this is actually a newer unit. It was purchased maybe 6 to 8 months ago. Where is it? There it is. It's a Silverstone 700W 80 plus PSU. It's not 80 plus bronze, it's just a regular 80 plus. This was on sale for $69. You can usually get them for around about $82 to $85, but for a 700W PSU with 80 plus rating, not bad. You really want to watch it when you're going with second-hand PSUs. You're much better off buying brand new because you know what they've been through. They're not full of dust, they're not going to explode on you. Obviously, some of the higher-end PSUs, when you buy them second-hand, have been well maintained and made really good components. They can be a good pickup too. But for this particular build, we got the 700W. It's quite handy for running things right up to a R9 290, 390. I had a 290X running on this just fine. You could probably even SLI some 970s on that, not a problem. So, a good little budget value one. Not modular, quite messy. Anyway, you get what you pay for. For case fans, we'll be using 120mm sickle flows in the rear of the case, possibly even the front. I've got to see what sort of noise levels we've got. We've got two 900 RPM case fans in the front. They don't move a lot of air, but we'll see how we go with those. If I've got noise headroom, I'll try the sickle flows, see how we go. And in the top, we'll be using Thermaltake ring fans. It's got a bit of a blue theme since all these things have got blue LEDs. There's blue RAM, there's a blue motherboard. But these will be in the top. Whether they're an exhaust or an intake, we'll see. We'll see how we go, whether they're intake or exhaust, and maybe mess around a little bit, but I get the feeling they may be exhaust because I'm a big fan of top exhaust. Big fan of top exhausts. Over here we've got the Samsung 1080p generic office monitor. These people just about throw out. You can get them for between $50 to $100. Really good at entry level. They're 60 Hz, 1080p. There's obviously no FreeSync or VSync, but it will get you by. We have a really cheap $10 HP keyboard, USB, doesn't have a problem. I use it as my little overclocking motherboard when I'm overclocking other people's systems. So my USB RGB keyboard doesn't like overclocking on this particular motherboard. It doesn't register it. It's really weird. And just another throwaway mouse. So all in all, very cheap parts. We'll put them together and we'll see what sort of performance we can get out of it.